The Indiana Fever entered the 2026 season carrying the weight of unfinished business. A year prior, the franchise had posted a record 24 wins and reached the WNBA semifinals, a run built almost entirely around the presence of Caitlin Clark, who, despite missing the majority of the 2025 season due to soft tissue injuries to her groin and quad, along with a bone bruise in her left ankle, had remained the gravitational center of everything the organization was trying to build. The question entering 2026 was whether the front office had done enough to protect that foundation. As the season progressed, a series of events, a disputed injury report, a revoked media credential, a televised sideline confrontation, and a series of coaching decisions that drew immediate public backlash, produced an answer that a significant portion of the league's fan base found troubling. To understand the environment Clark is operating in, it helps to establish the broader context of how the franchise has been managed. Christy Sides, who had guided the Fever to their first playoff appearance since 2016, was fired at the end of the 2024 season. The organization then moved quickly to hire Stephanie White, who had most recently served as head coach of the Connecticut Sun. White's professional resume in the WNBA was, by conventional metrics, impressive. She was named the 2023 WNBA Coach of the Year. She led the Sun to a 22-10 record in 2023 and a 28-12 record in 2024, reaching the semifinals in both seasons. Those credentials made her a desirable candidate. Several other franchises, including the Chicago Sky, were reportedly in pursuit of her services before Indiana secured the hire. What received considerably less attention in the coverage surrounding that hire was White's collegiate record. Between 2016 and 2021, White served as head coach of the Vanderbilt women's basketball program. Over 5 seasons, she compiled a 46-83 record and went 13-54 in Southeastern Conference play. Vanderbilt never finished better than tied for 11th in the SEC standings during her tenure. The program never reached the NCAA tournament. In her final season, the 2020-21 campaign was suspended on January 18th with the team at 4-4 overall and 0-3 in conference play, after a depleted roster reduced by COVID-19 protocols, opt-outs, injuries, a player dealing with myocarditis, and another recovering from an ACL injury, left the program unable to continue. Shortly after the season was suspended, 3 starters announced transfers, including the team's leading scorer. White was fired the following April. Her contract was terminated before its scheduled end. That record alone would not be disqualifying. Collegiate coaching environments are complex, and White's subsequent success in the WNBA suggests she adapted. The Sun teams she led were experienced, cohesive, and built around a veteran core that could execute within structured systems. The Indiana Fever are a fundamentally different environment. Clark is 24 years old, the team is young. Its identity, both on the floor and in the marketplace, is built around a player whose offensive instincts are largely self-generated, one who has led the WNBA in assists and operates most effectively when given the latitude to read the game in real time. The tension between that kind of player and a coach with a historically rigid, structure-dependent approach is not unusual in professional sports. What has made this particular situation notable is the degree to which it has surfaced publicly. Through a visible sideline altercation, through a sustained and vocal debate around in-game substitution decisions, and through the revocation of a credentialed reporter's access. The sideline incident occurred during a May 31st loss to the Portland Fire. The Fever entered that game having lost consecutive road games, dropping to 4-4 on the season. Clark and Aaliyah Boston helped Indiana build an 8-4 lead in the early minutes. White then substituted both players out at the 6:30 mark of the first quarter. Portland responded with a 13-2 run. Indiana never recovered and lost by 16 points, 184. During a timeout in that game, Clark and White were observed in a visible argument on the bench. According to reports, the confrontation ended with White telling Clark to leave the bench and directing a rookie to take her seat. The substitution decision drew immediate criticism. Among those who weighed in was columnist Jason Whitlock, who argued that the decision appeared deliberate, a characterization White supporters rejected. The broader criticism, however, centered on something more straightforward. The Fever had a lead, their 2 best players were generating it, and the substitution handed Portland momentum at a critical early juncture in the game. Clark herself, when asked about the incident in the days that followed, was measured. She stated that she supported White and that the tension visible on the sideline was not representative of a deeper fracture. "I ride for Steph," she told reporters. "Steph has my back more than anybody." Whether that represents Clark's genuine assessment or a player managing her public positioning in a difficult organizational environment is a question only she can answer. What is observable is that entering 2026, Clark is averaging 29.4 minutes per game, leading the WNBA in assists at 8.1 per game and scoring 20.1 points per contest. numbers that place her among the most productive players in the league. The scrutiny of substitution decisions that remove a player with those statistics from the floor during winning stretches is, under any analytical framework, legitimate. It is within that context that the situation involving reporter Scott Agness must be understood. Agness is the longest-tenured beat reporter covering the Indiana Fever. On May 20th, Clark was listed as a late scratch before a game against the Portland Fire with a back injury, despite not appearing on the official injury report in the lead-up to the contest. Agness reported on his website and via social media that Clark's absence was part of what he characterized as a strategic management plan developed by the player and the team in response to her injury-shortened 2025 season, in which she appeared in just 13 games. Several reporters covering the Fever expressed frustration with the team's injury communication that week. Aaliyah Boston also missed a game unexpectedly around the same period, again without prior listing on the injury report. Clark, in a press conference on May 22nd, addressed the situation directly. She noted that she had informed her own mother of her inability to play at 4:47 p.m. and that media members were informed at 5:20 p.m., 40 minutes later. The Fever were subsequently issued a warning by the WNBA regarding their injury reporting practices and have since listed Clark as probable in subsequent injury reports. The decision to revoke Agness's credentials generated a significantly larger public response than the organization may have anticipated. Far from quieting discussion about the team's internal management, it amplified it. The removal of the reporter with the deepest institutional knowledge of the franchise, at a moment when questions about injury transparency and coaching decisions were already circulating, produced an environment in which speculation filled the space that documented reporting had previously occupied. That vacuum is where a parallel media conversation has been playing out. On various commentary platforms, analysts with established relationships with Indiana's front office and coaching staff have promoted narratives characterizing Clark as a source of organizational friction. One analyst who had previously been among the more vocal defenders of Clark's early career was observed, within a compressed time frame of roughly 10 days, shifting to a position noticeably more critical of her conduct and her role within the team dynamic. Critics of this shift noted that the analyst in question had spent more than a decade cultivating professional relationships with the franchise's general manager and head coach. Relationships documented through years of shared platform appearances, radio segments, and collaborative media content. Some of that archival content was subsequently removed from public accessibility, a decision that attracted notice among those tracking the coverage. Whether those deletions represent routine digital housekeeping or something more deliberate is not provable from publicly available information. What is documented is the pattern: a franchise under increasing public scrutiny over its management decisions, the removal of its most tenured independent reporter, and a parallel shift in the commentary of analysts with direct professional ties to the organization's leadership. The most consequential framing that has emerged from friendly media sources close to the Fever's front office is the suggestion that Clark has been a destabilizing presence, that her manner, her conduct, and her expectations have created institutional friction. The specific language attributed to organizational personnel by one media figure was direct: that front office members view Clark as, in their characterization, a diva. That characterization exists in tension with the measurable record. Clark's professional conduct throughout the most difficult periods of her tenure, an injury-shortened sophomore season, a franchise coaching change, public sideline confrontations broadcast to national audiences, has been, by any observable standard, restrained. She has consistently declined opportunities to direct public criticism at her organization. In contexts where other athletes have publicly forced resolution by demanding trades, by leaking frustrations through intermediaries, or by refusing to engage, Clark has remained inside the organizational framework and continued to produce at an elite level. The framing of a high-performing player as temperamentally problematic is a recognizable pattern in professional sports management. It is most commonly deployed when an organization needs to establish a counter-narrative to its own institutional failures. The questions currently surrounding the Fever, the legitimacy of the substitution decision in Portland, the handling of injury transparency, the revocation of a credentialed reporter's access, the publicly documented sideline conflict between a star player and her head coach, are questions about organizational management. The diva characterization redirects those questions toward the athlete. It is worth considering what the Indiana Fever actually have in Caitlin Clark, and what they stand to lose if the current environment produces an irreconcilable fracture. Clark's presence transformed the economics of women's basketball in a manner without historical precedent. She broke television viewing records during her college career. Her first WNBA season drove measurable attendance increases across the league, not only in Indiana, Arenas that had operated with significant empty sections began filling. Television contracts were renegotiated in an environment of heightened commercial interest. The financial implication of her continued presence in the league is not theoretical. It is reflected in broadcast agreements, sponsorship structures, and ticket revenue. A player of that commercial and competitive value exists in every sport as a figure whose departure from a franchise has catastrophic downstream consequences. Franchise values, attendance figures, and media rights agreements in professional sports are frequently player-dependent in ways that ownership and management often underestimate until the player is gone. The Fever's front office is not operating in a commercial vacuum. The decisions being made at the management level, decisions about playing time, injury communication, media access, and internal culture, will ultimately be evaluated against the outcome they produce. Whether Clark remains in Indiana and what condition she is in, physically and organizationally, when the franchise attempts to build a championship-level team around her. The coaching background that White carries into that responsibility includes genuine success at the WNBA level and a demonstrated capacity to develop team-oriented systems around veteran talent. It also includes a 5-year collegiate record of 46-83, a program that never reached a winning record in conference play, a season suspension, a wave of transfers, and an early contract termination. That record does not define her current capacity as a coach. It does, however, suggest that her methods produce less consistent results in environments characterized by instability, roster youth, and players who require high autonomy development, which is an accurate description of the Indiana Fever. At the time of this publication, the Fever are 4-4 in the 2026 season. Clark is producing statistically at an elite level. The team's most experienced independent reporter has had his credentials revoked. A media environment shaped in part by commentators with direct professional ties to the organization's leadership is actively promoting narratives unfavorable to the franchise's most valuable player. The WNBA has issued the franchise a formal warning regarding injury reporting, and a sideline confrontation between Clark and White, captured on camera and distributed to a national audience, remains the most recent visible data point in an unresolved question about whether the organization is structured to maximize, or to manage, the most commercially and athletically significant player in the history of women's professional basketball. How that question resolves will be among the more consequential developments in the league's history. The fans watching understand what is at stake. The numbers are not in dispute. The stakes are not abstract, and the record of the institution being asked to protect this investment is, at minimum, worthy of the scrutiny it is currently receiving.